They're just because their eyes were open. They saw it
Yeah.
right in front of them. Oh my goodness, what John's saying is true. These guys are all compromised, and just about, it's not. I don't want to say every single person, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of rot at the top. So
Yes.
it's like a virus. It's like a immune system that has lost its capacity to fight a virus. That's what the evangelical world is right now.
Hey everyone, it's Truth Unbound once again. I'm Walter Swaim, and I am so very glad you're here with me because we are really in for a very special time of understanding and learning and growing as believers in Christ, and especially in the midst of so many things going on at once around us. We're going to be having an interview with a friend and someone who I respect and admire, whose ministry I respect and admire very much. In the early days of Truth Unbound, he was very helpful to me in getting just some advice here and there on what to use and how to do it, and have followed him as well. He has a very faithful following, and his podcast has grown exponentially in the last few years and continues to. And so I was so thrilled that he received and accepted my invitation to sit down for a little while with us. And, our world and our nation, the church, is facing tremendous challenges, and that will only increase as we understand what the Word of God tells us is to come in the future and is already in action right now, really. And this interview isn't about prophecy, but what these challenges that we face we've got to respond to them with the wisdom of God as put forth in His Word. And there's an understanding there that God gives us and a way to respond to it all. And so our guest is Jon Harris from the podcast Conversations That Matter. And just before we get into this with him, I want to remind you that Truth Unbound continues to grow, and that's only because of you and sharing the word and getting the word out about Truth Unbound continuously. And so would you click on like and click to subscribe and follow the podcast, as well as share it continuously, every episode with everyone you know. And also want to remind you as well a very special offer, and that is I'm academic dean at Louisiana Baptist University. And if you are seeking deeper and more practical and biblical and education and training, then Louisiana Baptist University is for you. I invite you to go to lbu.edu and fill out the application, or at least the contact form. And if you mention the words Truth Unbound in either one, if you enroll, you will receive automatically a $500 scholarship towards your tuition. All right. Well, I hope you do that. I hope you share the word about Truth Unbound. And without further ado, here is Jon Harris from Conversations That Matter. Welcome, everybody, to Truth Unbound once again. And we are here with Jon Harris, a great podcaster, someone who had a tremendous impression on me in my first beginnings of podcasting, and he's become a friend, and I'm appreciative of him being present with us today. I'm your host, Walter Swaim, and Truth Unbound is the podcast where we look at issues and trends, questions about what's going on in society and the church, questions about God and the Bible, and we look to God's Word for answers and how He wants us to respond as well. And we look at His Word as plainly read and understood. And today what we're going to be looking at is a question, a big one. And with that question is what are the challenges that are facing Christianity today, especially here in the West, especially in our nation? But what are the major challenges facing evangelical Christianity today? And so again, as I said, we've got my friend Jon Harris here with us, and directly and indirectly helped me get started with the podcast and in the very beginning, and helping me with a couple of questions along the way, and what equipment should I use and things like that. And I'm grateful, Jon, for your help and for your inspiration to myself and Truth Unbound. and just I wanted to introduce you as well to the audience that I have had, especially those who have been so faithful subscribers and followers for so long, and to introduce yourself to them and your ministry, your podcast as well. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to know the Lord, your family, how you came to do the podcast, and your social security number. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. But anyway, but seriously, just those things, and also because I think for a lot of those that have been listening to Truth Unbound, and even in my own background, I think well, not think, I know and have seen how you have such a broad contact and feel of the pulse of other circles that are out there in within Christianity, and that we know of, but not maybe so well. And you have a broad overview, and you've been involved and engaged at different levels of society and different levels of Christianity, areas of Christianity, I should say. And anyway, I don't want to. And without any further ado, as they say, I want to give it over to you. And if you could just tell us again about yourself and your ministry, and thank you again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, I was saved at a young age. My dad's actually a pastor. He's been pastoring for 33 years, and explained the gospel to me when I was about 6 years old is when I made the profession. And of course, like a lot of kids in my teens, there were some challenges. Some of them were apologetics related, and I got into apologetics. Then when I went to college, that was one of the elements of the campus ministry that I was first part of. So
Mm,
I had already an interest in history and an interest in politics, and apologetics was added to that. And those were three elements I think that helped me understand the social justice movement when it started, when I was in seminary, at least when it started in Christian circles. And I wrote, I think as early as 2014, some critiques, but I didn't
mhm.
start podcasting on it till 2019. And I didn't think it would be a big podcast, but people were really interested in doing more than one video, and so I kept doing them. And then in 2020, that launched me into other areas, and here we are. So I think it's 2025. I've been doing this about 6 years now,
Mm.
and the Lord is blessed it, and I'm just kind of seeing where it's going to take me.
That's great. Yeah, because you started out writing. I know you said you wrote different pieces, but you had a blog, didn't you, before you did this?
I had a number of blogs. I had like five or six, and
Yeah,
they I didn't. There were dry spells where I wouldn't write anything for even a year or more, and then I would write a piece or a few pieces about various things I was interested in, because I was interested in a lot of things. But
right.
there was one kind of main blog where I wrote on more socio-political topics, and yeah, I think I wrote one or two pieces on social justice related things before 2019, or before that, actually, even 2018. I actually ramped it up. The beginning of 2017 and into 2018, I started talking more about it. But there was a few pieces before that, and then 2019 is when I really started going hardcore.
Okay. Yeah, and again, not only this, the podcast, but it has also spun off filming, right? If you did a couple of documentaries, I remember the guy in Chicago, I think it was, remember?
Hmm.
I forgot his name.
Yeah.
And then also Truth Script as well, if you want to mention those things.
Yeah. I've made a few documentaries. You're thinking of Paint the Wall Black with Juan Riesco,
Right, right.
and that was a social justice related story, and I felt compelled to do it because no one else seemed to want to take it, and it's a really good story. But
Yes.
uh, I learned a lot with that about kind of where the lines are in the evangelical world, what they're willing to promote, what they're not willing to promote, and they weren't very willing to promote Juan, which I thought was crazy because it was such a compelling story. But
Definitely.
I figured out since then why I think that is. But I've done some documentaries on the monument controversy, and
Hmm.
I'm even trying to think what all. I did one on the Holdeman Mennonites, which wasn't social justice, but it was a threat to more of a local church. I did do recently. People might have seen it, or at least I helped. I wasn't. I did the interviews. I conducted the interviews, and the guy who does my editing generally for documentary stuff, or at least helps me with the editing, he did it for the David Platt documentaries that came out
Yes, yes.
last. When did they come out? Last September? Or, no,
Yeah,
November. November, I
yeah.
guess.
Real recent.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I basically did practically the whole thing, the filming, the editing of the 1607 Project documentary, which was a history documentary last
Right.
year. So yeah, there's been a bunch of documentaries. Yeah, TrueScript is an organization that I thought of years ago. I wanted something that was a competitor to the Gospel Coalition that would do
Hmm.
something similar, that would communicate to normal average people with short form articles, but wasn't social justice compromised.
Right.
And TrueScript is doing, growing. It's a steady growth, but we're glad to see it, and it's doing well. We have some conferences hosted through them. Um, yeah. What else? I'm putting out a music album at the beginning of next month of just things I've written and recorded. So I mean, there's just a lot of different
Wow.
things I guess I've been involved with, but the podcast I think is what probably most people know me for.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, and I just, just so excited for you and the different things, the doors that God has opened for you, and to get the message out there. And yeah, I thought that the video about the again his name in Chicago was really, but he went back, didn't he? After he was in Texas for a while.
Yeah, he went back to the business that had been shut down by BLM activists. He opened it up again. It didn't fare as well though. It probably was open 6 months, and he ended up closing. He wasn't getting the business that he
Right.
needed, and this was like the number one restaurant in Chicago on Yelp before then. I mean, it's insane that
Mm.
they did what they did to him, but
Yeah. Exactly.
I think they smeared his reputation enough that the people in that area weren't going to frequent the business, and so. He's doing well though. He's working for I think Love Life, which means he's anti-abortion, and he's doing like sidewalk counseling and preaching the gospel at abortion clinics.
Great, 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 great. Well, good. Yeah, in fact, I was up there. I'm academic dean at Louisiana Baptist University, and I travel a lot representing them. And I was just up in Chicago actually in December, and it's come to my mind. But anyway, hey, thank you again, and let's dive in right into the subject. And hopefully, we won't. For those who don't, we had some technical problems here a while ago trying to record, but I think we're good now. What are the major challenges from your point of view and with your involvement and what you see? Because again, it's, I think about it too, is, I'm 60, I've been in ministry 40 years. And, I was, I over the years, it seemed to be that there was mainly, and this is, of course, I'm ancient, so it's before social media, before internet and cell phones. And so it seemed to be that there was maybe one or two big issues. A lot of times it was inerrancy would keep cropping up, the battle for the inspiration and inerrancy of the scriptures. And it would be that and maybe one other issue, and then it would kind of fade and things would calm, and then there'd be another one. Seemed to be somewhere between every 7 to 10 years. And then, but now it's exploded. There's multiple fronts. And so the question here is, what are the major challenges facing evangelical Christianity now, not only from outside, but also from within? And anyway, go ahead and go for it. Let us know what you see and what you feel, what you think. And imagine much of us see the same thing.
Yeah, there's always threats the church has to face internally and externally. I think that liberalism is a big threat. That's a socio-political thing, but also it does influence your theology quite a bit. People
Right.
watch the Wes Huff interview, and I thought he did a great job. There's a few things I caught, though, that I thought, okay, on social issues, he is trying to accommodate people who are liberal, and that is the task many apologetics ministries feel like they have. And I think this has just been in the water for a long time. Things like the Bible, trying to get the Bible off the hook for being sexist or misogynistic by saying
Oh,
that,
yeah.
well, it made women, though it lifted their status in society, which may be true for ancient cultures, but when you're comparing it to a 21st century egalitarian standard, it falls short in the minds of the people you're trying to argue to. So I've tried to argue that really what you ought to do is just critique liberalism and to say, look,
Mm.
feminism's way off. I'll tell you why the Bible is true. The Bible tells you and reflects the roles of men and women accurately, and women are actually more happy when they follow what the Bible teaches. There was actually just a study that came out the other day about staying home and not working in the workforce. don't shoot the messenger here, but women are more happy in that. Go
Mm.
figure, right? So um, it's I would say that uh, there's compromises we probably don't realize are around us. And with the social justice thing, I think this is amped up because uh, a lot of the members of organizations in evangelicalism ended up voting for Donald Trump, even though their leaders tried to get them not to, or at least gave the
Mm.
stink eye to Trump supporters.
Yeah.
And the leaders wanted evangelicalism to go woke, and it didn't. And so they're back at the drawing board and they're retreating to liberalism. They're not admitting they were wrong for the most part. They are just saying that, because wokeness is basically post-liberal. So they're saying, hey, we're not too woke. Like, so they've taken two steps forward. They're trying to sort of take one step back, course correct, but they're still pushing the needle in a bad direction. And I think that they're leaning more into a kind of liberalism that a lot of people are used to. So things like we should have a neutral society that doesn't favor any religion, uh, as opposed to a society which we used to have, and which in some areas we still have, that favors Christianity. So this gets into like who gives the invocation at a town day, or who, what kind of displays are there and holidays. Is in God we trust in the courtroom? Do you swear on a Bible? These are all things that we're used to from a Christian society, but we've been seeing them disappear. At the foundation of the country, we even had like anti-blasphemy laws. We've had anti-pornography laws in various states. Those things have all kind of disappeared, and evangelicals today seem to be, I would say, broadly speaking, the leaders at least, enthusiastic about that kind of thing. That it's really this great jump forward to not have Christianity set the public tone and the morals and the mores of a society. Christianity doesn't really have anything to offer there. It's just a personal thing. And liberalism really does take individuals, their choices, their needs, their wants, and it promotes them in a way that is very deeply religious, because the self-actualization of a person, their
Mm.
freedom to make any choice they want, even if it's a vice. These
Mhm.
are rights, essentially. Like you need to be able to participate in the most unbounded way in the market place, and you shouldn't have any needs that aren't fulfilled, right? Like Christianity really has nothing in common with this. Christianity actually teaches that we ought to have regulations, put certain desires to death, cultivate virtue. We
Right.
should uphold societal norms that trace back to creation norms. We ought to have a ordered society, and that doesn't mean that you can't have liberty. But liberty is the liberty to do what God has told us to do, not the liberty to do whatever sinful thing we want. And I see Christians, I can give examples, I guess, if you want, but in ministries that claim to not be anti woke, promoting this kind of neutrality that allows
Right.
for that. And
Right.
famously, David French said, "Drag Queen Story Hour represents the blessings of liberty." So he like wouldn't personally advocate that, but we need a neutral public square that where these things are acceptable. And I think of even the guys who are acceptable in the minds of evangelicals for critiquing wokeness. They always do it. The popular ones who have platforming, they critique it from a liberal direction.
Right.
Guys like Neil Shenvi critique it
Yes.
from a very liberal direction, I would say. He goes to J.D. Greer's church. He protects guys like Jarvis Williams, Walter Strickland, guys who supported Resolution 9 in the Southern Baptist Convention, guys who are trafficking in wokeness. He'll put a shield up for them. He'll really hammer people who are conservative, but then he'll write a book and you put something out there, say critiquing social justice and
Critiquing.
promoting himself
Yes.
as anti-social justice. And
Yes. It's very
really, it's from a
confusing.
liberal point of view, because social justice is post-liberal. Social justice is we should think in terms of groups, and liberalism and neutrality doesn't work, and we should favor some groups and not others. And he's saying,
Right.
well, no, not that. We should retreat to some kind of a neutrality. And Christians for almost 2,000 years have pretty much, like, across the board, most Christians, unless you're Anabaptist, I suppose, have believed it's much better to have a Christian society, some kind of cultural Christianity. That doesn't mean hypocrisy. It doesn't mean that you want false converts. It just means that people are operating by and respecting Christian standards,
Hmm.
and that's been the prevailing opinion. And I'd say that that's changing in the church. And I could give other examples, but that's one of the big things I see. I think within the church, you see obviously a continual softening of male roles, and there's just sort of an effeminacy that I think it's a vibe, but it's also taught in very strict ways that like, um, women can basically operate in society in any way they want. But there's this very short list of things that they cannot do or they should not do that God has said. But when you say that, when you make out like God's being arbitrary, that He just kind of creates these rules for women
Mm.
that don't make sense, they're not rooted in creation, you undermine your own position. And uh, I think that the next generation is going to have to contend with these things. They're not going to buy into that because it doesn't make sense. It's a
Right.
halfway measure. Apologetics ministries, I think, I already mentioned before, trying to uh, reconcile with liberalism in some way to make Christianity look good in the minds of the left. That stuff gets into your church. It gets into even children's ministries and like there was this church, I think that, well, I don't want to say where, but they had, in their bathroom, they had for the ladies' bathroom, they had all these sayings on the wall and stuff, and everything was like a very much like female empowerment, self help kind of statement,
Right.
uh, and it's good to encourage people, but you want to be accurate. You're not trying to cultivate feminism within your churches, but I think that there are churches doing this without realizing that's what they're doing. So that's a long list. I could
Right.
go into more, but uh, there's really a challenge from the world. So tremendous pressure to conform to liberal ways in some sectors, still to social justice, woke kind of tendencies, and sadly, Christians, without realizing, oftentimes will reconcile themselves to it.
Right. Wow. Yeah. I think you hit it all. Uh, yeah, that's very true, especially where the church intersects with society, and you nailed it in those different areas. That identification, and again, boy, I was just so thrilled with Megan's book, um, Shepherds for Sale, and
Hmm.
that is just. That was a knockout, I thought, and I know she's taken such tremendous heat for it. She stands up to it pretty well, and I watched multiple interviews of her because you get the same interview over the same thing to promote it, but you'll say different things between different ones because things will come to your mind differently at moments, and just to hear her respond at each one, it was tremendous, and I think what was like you said, it's this. Uh, we want to look good, however you define that, before the world. But to see the grift that also is involved with that, and the peddling of self promotion in it, and I'm thinking of, and again, like I'm just not afraid to either just at certain points here for different names. I remember watching during COVID and the number of uh, big Eva names, Stetzer and others that were just lining up with Collins to promote the vaccines and all of that period. It was almost embarrassing. At least it
Yeah.
was for me, from my perspective. And you could just see it rolling. And I'm thinking this has become its own industry, and they're peddling this and pushing this, and without real. But here's what I want to get to with that is it was all done under the banner of the love of Christ. If you really loved someone like Jesus does, you would do this. I mean, how do you really argue against that, And so, from a lay perspective, what were your thoughts, especially of those things during that period?
Well, it showed a weakness because evangelicals, leaders at least, think they can get away with justifying anything by
Right.
putting a veneer of love or trying to say it's a gospel issue or trying to
Right.
convince you that this is part of the unity that Christians have in Christ, and they'll take
Right.
things like differences between nationalities and equate that to well, we've broken down the dividing wall of Jews and Gentiles, and not understanding that that's actually about the law, and that Christians are not required to keep the Jewish law, but they'll make it out like that was some kind of a racist thing, and then support things like open borders as a result of that. Like we shouldn't really have uh, strict borders, or we should deport people who have broken the law and come here illegally because, and they'll appeal to some doctrine, and so. Um, it's manipulative. it shows a
Yes.
weakness that some Christians fell for that. But I think for the next 4 years, what you're going to find is a lot of these evangelicals in influential organizations, unless it's like Christianity Today, which has basically become sojourners, or
Yes,
like a
exactly.
truly left leaning organization. If it's more of a mainstream organization, which I don't even know if Christianity Today qualifies as that anymore, they're going to be awfully silent on political things. Um, it's hard to say. I mean, you can't predict the future, but I would say that they were awfully silent, many of them, even in the lead up to Donald Trump's election. I was out there trying to find, has anyone said anything? And I found a few examples, but people know in leadership that the pews didn't listen to them. And so I think what's going to be interesting is in about 2.5 years,
Hmm.
which is about the time the election cycle is going to start for
Right.
2028. What are
Yep.
they going to do at that point?
Right.
After Donald Trump has tried to promote his plan, has deported some people, there's been sob stories about how bad it is. What are they going to do? How are they going to approach you, the evangelical pew sitter, and convince you that the Republicans are bad, or convince you the Republicans need to go a different direction, or the America First is bad, whatever? I think that we'll see these arguments start to reemerge. And I think they're just quiet now. It's like the calm before the storm, perhaps. But
Exactly. Yeah.
that's a prediction. I can't predict the future. A lot of things could happen, but
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I think what you're spot on, that there was a reconciliation of evangelical leadership with the regime or the status quo in leadership, and
Hmm.
there's a willingness and a desire to be liked by them. That's very dangerous, and
Yes.
they don't have that enthusiasm as much towards the Trump administration. We'll say they they seem to really want to be loved by the Democrats and the institutions that are controlled by Democrats. So if that love is still there, which I think it is, we're going to uh, see more of it. And really underneath all of that is they're okay with a totalitarian kind of statist, architecture arrangement in the country, as long as they get the pat on the head. That's not a good
Right.
thing. That's very bad. Uh,
Exactly.
but I think we saw that very loud and clear. COVID like revealed things that a lot of people, because I was trying to talk to a lot of folks in 2019 that this stuff is going on, guys, and
Yes.
so many were doubting me, calling me a liar, calling me a slanderer. I'm now in chat groups with some of the same people who call me those names, who are more like they're more hardcore than I am now. They're just because their eyes were open. They saw
Yeah.
right in front of them. Oh my goodness, what John's saying is true. These guys are all compromised, and just about, it's not, I don't want to say every single person, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of rot at the top. So
Yes.
it's like a virus. It's like a immune system that has lost its capacity to fight a virus. That's what the evangelical world is right now.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And, and I, and it's a shameless plug here, but I was writing my dissertation for my doctorate, which turned into a book. The book is called To Be Clear, Proclaiming the Gospel in a Post-Truth World. And I was starting to, it was interesting because I added a lot of these things and these trends and tendencies that I was seeing the same at the beginning, like you were talking 2018, 19, and then it just bolted forward with the explosion, societal explosion in 2020, with all those issues. Like you said, it just brought it up. And within a few months, a lot of the terminology was even, I had in my book explaining it kind of, just kind of a book. The book was trying to, I was trying to introduce people to these terms and these trends and define them, and for them that are like, what is this? I don't understand what this is. I don't know what this means, and within weeks, months, some of that terminology even had already changed and morphed. It just brought up so much, and then Megan comes along here, 3, 4 years later and has it all documented so carefully through this whole time, even afterward. And there's so much pushback. I tell you, to take a step back, I think the most surprising and disappointing, some of them like Stetzer and others, I was like, yeah, I saw that already, but with when Max Lucado came out, I remember him coming out in that plaza, that square, and and it was just very compromising, I thought, biblically. I was really very woke, and I was just really surprised and disappointed, and with that especially. But let me accelerate this a little bit too and I encourage those who are watching, listening to this, to listen to the last two or close to last two. You put out so many podcasts. I love it. But on the new right, could you take a moment for those who don't understand that? Would you just take a moment and in a nutshell explain what that is, especially what that is in contrast to what it isn't?
Yeah, the new Christian right. So
Right,
uh,
right.
there's, the, I guess I picked up this term because there's going to be a book coming out later this year. I'm actually contributing a chapter to it by a bunch of guys who are on the new Christian right. So they
Right.
would not call themselves, at least not all of them would call themselves Christian nationalists. Some of them probably would, but they are part of a move. And so I've tried to define this and present the merits of this to people
Hmm.
who I think most have been influenced by liberalism to some extent. So they don't, some of them don't understand what's going on and they're listening to their leaders and the critiques their leaders are giving. Others, I think, though, legitimately have liberal assumptions and they don't like what the new Christian right is trying to do. So I'll define it and then explain, I guess, like what I think they're doing and where it's going. It's a very broad group of people in Protestant evangelicalism who uh, could be anything from general equity theonomists to traditional Baptists to paleo conservatives to um, I'm trying to think, what other groups are in that. They're pretty much all post liberal. I think is the uniting factor, and they're post liberal in a very Protestant Christian kind of way. They think that we've been unmoored and the lines have been cut between us and Christian societies that predated us. And we want to reestablish those connections. Now, some of those connections still exist. I mentioned actually a few earlier with like a small town in the middle of the Bible Belt probably has a lot of really Christian things happening on the ground there. But where I live right now in New York and many other places, they used to have a Christian identity and Christian values that they don't have anymore. So, what went wrong, right? This is the question everyone's asking. What went wrong? Well, the new Christian right is saying that one of the things that went wrong was we ditched Christianity in favor of liberalism. And this has been a process, but
Hmm.
it's really been happening especially strongly since World War II. I would argue it goes back before that, but they want to turn the clock back on some of these things. And so it's no surprising they're going to be called all kinds of names for that because progressives want to progress. They think that everything's getting better, and that means more social equality. So you want to turn the clock back, even make America great again is, trying to turn the clock back. That's terrible. But it's like
Hmm.
when you go to the dumpster and you throw out a bunch of things that you realize maybe some of that was trash, but later maybe some of those things I needed, right? And the new
Yeah.
Christian right is not saying that we need to recover every single thing. They're just saying that there's creation norms. We used to reflect those in society, mediated through tradition. Some of those traditions we've ditched, and it's to our peril. We should reconnect. And so they'll say things like we should have anti-blasphemy laws, we should have anti-pornography laws. Um, some guys have said things that you could question the prudence of saying this, but they'll say, I don't know if the 19th Amendment was such a good idea. Maybe it's not the role of women to be in the police force and to be in the military, and they would include voting in that because they view that as the government bearing the sword, and that's participation in bearing the sword. And so there's guys that will go into these categories that very much offend liberal sensibilities, but I think even the guys who don't say that, the uniting factor that they all have is they're very interested in reconnecting with old paths that lead back to Christendom of some kind. Uh, so, um, so, so I think where it's going is you're going to see new organizations pop up that are very friendly to this kind of thing and asking. A lot of them are asking questions. They don't have it all figured out, but they're exploring alternative solutions that are outside the 3x5
Right.
card of acceptable opinion. And um, and I think that it's going to grow, even if there's not identifiable organizations. There's still enthusiasm online for figures and books and people reading old guys that are dead, but they seem to have their theology and their thinking straight on some of the problems confronting us now, you're going to see more of that. And I don't see how it goes away, to be honest with you. I think there's going to be competing post-liberal philosophies,
Yeah.
and some of those might be ideological. Some of those actually might be other forms of, other modern ideologies. I think of some of the more like fascistic kind of biological reductionist thinking that's out there, or neo-Nazi mindsets and stuff. Like a lot of that isn't liberal necessarily, but um, it is a form of modernity, and I think that is uh, probably not very influential, but that's going to be like one of the elements you'll see in certain quarters popping up. You're going to see, though, all kinds of Catholic integralism. Hey, the Roman Catholic Church should be the one that's arranging our society, and liberalism's wrong. It's the Roman Catholic Church. That's going to be a competitor. There's all kinds of different notions about how society should be arranged, because everyone wants to go back to the drawing board who lived through 2020.
Yes.
They said something went wrong. Where did it go wrong?
Right.
And was it 1990? Was it this World War II? Was it the Civil War? Were we just wrong from the beginning? Was the Declaration of Independence a mistake? There's monarchists out there who say we should have a king. Now, a lot of these groups aren't very prominent. I'm just saying there's some renewed interest around alternative ideas, and I think the New Christian Right represents one of those. And I think a more healthy version because of post-liberal version, because I think that it actually does dovetail with American history, who Americans traditionally have been. There still are some chords that haven't been disconnected that we want to preserve, that the New Christian Right says are worth keeping. It's primarily younger folks. It's millennials. It's some Gen Z. There's obviously some Gen X and some boomers in there too, but I would
Hmm.
say the energy's around younger millennials, and it's exciting to some extent just to see that there's people reading books that I thought I was the only one reading, or
Yeah.
some
Right.
nerds out there, you know. But
Yeah.
they're interested. They want to know what Augustine said. They want to know what Calvin said about these things. They want to see translations of works by reformers that you never heard of, brought into the public sphere. And what did Pierre Viret say? And so it's all good stuff as far as the recovery, and I think the study. We just haven't seen it really implemented much on an actual political level, um, and that's going to be the open question. There's guys like Dusty Devers, who I could say would be on this spectrum, who are now in offices like state legislatures, but that's really not that significant. We would have to see some serious moves, I think, to see these guys really have control or power. But look, stranger things have happened, and
Hmm.
uh, there does seem to be a willingness for even some members of Congress to say, I'm a Christian nationalist,
Right.
which, that 5-10 years ago, I don't know that would have happened.
Right. Right. And mentioning that, is this New Christian Right, is it a part of, or um, how should I say it, a result of, or a rising out of the Christian nationalism struggles that have been going on? In other words,
Yeah.
it is? Okay.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think a lot of it. Yeah. Um, there's guys. So I'll give myself as an example. There's guys who, like, I've always been a Christian conservative. So for me, I don't feel like I've changed in any significant ways. I believe what I've believed for a long time. And this movement is just coming to some of the same conclusions that I've had. And there are people like
Yeah.
that where I never felt the need to call myself a Christian nationalist, but the occasion for a lot of the debates surrounding this have been people taking the term Christian nationalist, like Stephen Wolfe or Andrew Isker, and saying, this is now my term. I'm going to call myself this.
You're right.
And it was a pejorative the media was using against Christians who wanted to be politically out.
Exactly.
So that created, I think, a problem, a branding problem at the very least, and maybe even a problem for those with more liberal tendencies. But the branding issue is the media says this is terrible, and now we got some of our own saying that that's what they are. And what do we do about that? Oh no! And I think the freak out over it, a lot of it reveals the extent to which Christians care about what the media thinks and really want to make them still the ones setting the frame, and they want to work within that frame. And I think the New Christian Right is, in general, doesn't want to work within that frame. So I don't call myself a Christian nationalist, but I don't want to work within the media's frame. So if someone else calls themselves that and our ideas tend to dovetail, then I'll work with them and I'll support them. And great,
Right.
I don't care what CNN says about it. But unfortunately, in the Christian elite circles, I think they care very much what CNN says, and that's part of the issue we have.
Right, right, exactly. And I remember when that started coming out in 2020, the media, the press, especially the legacy press, they're legacy media, they're using this terminology, and then a bunch of Christian voices were jumping in trying to define it. It's still not clearly defined, in my opinion, what it is. And I remember too, you were trying to be conciliatory, I think, and at some point, was it last year, early last year, when even
I
among
hope
some
I'm
of
always
those.
conciliatory.
But I mean, when it got really hot there, I think among some in the reform camp, drawing
Yeah.
lines as to over Christian nationalism, and and so the audience understands. And I'm not trying to cause an issue at all here. I'm just defining things. I look at from the outside in because I'm more from the independent fundamental camp, if you
Hmm.
will, but not in the traditional sense. That term's been
Yeah,
uh,
I got it. Yeah, I'm from
yeah.
that camp too.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's just to see that was hard to watch, because otherwise I think they love each other, and you were trying to draw them together to move forward together. But anyway,
Yeah,
just
there's a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of accepting the false premises that the media and
exactly.
actors say about Christian nationalists. So it's a kind of a muddled mess to try to pick through. But there are liberal tendencies too. I think that I don't know if you want me mentioning the name of the organization you're probably thinking of, but some of the leaders in that organization I think have some liberal tendencies,
Yes.
and Christian nationalism offended those. And I here's the surprising thing, and here's what you're getting at, and here's what a lot of people have told me. It's not so much that someone uh, who preaches a good sermon, let's say, and believes the Bible. It's not so much that that person who doesn't agree with Christian nationalism, so they say, doesn't agree. It's not so much that they may have a problem that, hey, Christian nationalists sound a little racist, or Christian nationalists sound a little sexist, or whatever the complaint is. It's the fact that those guys are so willing to break off any communication and separate themselves and cast Christian nationalists into the outer darkness at the snap of a finger. That's the surprising thing,
Right.
because they're not as willing to do that sometimes, and very often with guys that are farther to their left. You think it's like such a bigger separation between them and an evangelical organization like a Nine Marks or the Gospel Coalition or Together for the Gospel, or I don't know. I'm trying to think. I'll probably think of others as Crew, whatever. They,
Right.
like those are bigger, much bigger jumps than between what they're saying and what supposed Christian nationalists are saying. But they seem much more public about, we are separating. Let me make an announcement of these evil Christian, right? That
Right.
where like can I say the organization, or am I not allowed
Please.
to? Okay,
Please.
so G3, right? We're talking about G3.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
so G3, like with Nine Marks, they just 1 year they had a booth there, and the next year they didn't, right? Like so you go to
Ah,
the conference, it's like, I don't know what year that was, 2021, 2022. Nine Marks doesn't have a booth here anymore. No announcement, no fanfare. It's like Joseph putting Mary away secretly, right? So no one knows. So uh, that's what they'll do with the Nine Marks,
yeah.
where they've legitimately pumped out woke material. Okay, right? Whatever, that's fine. But people are noticing that, like, okay, but when it comes to like Stephen Wolfe and his book, The Case for Christian Nationalism, like, you got to do how many articles and podcasts, and like you're so public about the fact that you are not with him and he is a bad man, and we're going to have a whole session at our conference against him specifically, naming him out, calling him out. They just don't treat the guys, even the woke guys they disagree with, the same way. And I think that's what a lot of people have noticed. And it's hurt them. And you said I was trying to be conciliatory. That's true. Like I really, I saw this train coming. I saw it.
Yeah. You
Even the whole
did.
thing that's happening now with Moscow and Ogden, which is a much smaller thing, but
Right.
Doug Wilson's ministries, like I've seen this for years kind of coming. and it's like you feel helpless. You're like, I see where it's going. I don't, I can't do much about it. But my hope is always that these guys would talk because they have more in common and they could work together against common threats rather than punch each other in the face and confuse all the people who follow both ministries or both teachings,
Exactly.
whatever. Um,
Exactly.
and that's what I've been on. So I've invited all of these guys onto my podcast. I've said private, public, whatever. With some of them, like I just want to get you guys in the room and let's talk. Let's be friends. Maybe we actually don't have as much, like we have more in common than we realize, but uh, no, there's no
Yeah, I
willingness. And I
remember.
and I will tell you, it's always, with every case, it is always the side that's against Christian nationalists that is unwilling to have the conversation. So
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
all I can do,
Exactly. Yeah,
you
and
know.
what was this? I didn't want to, and I purposely didn't want to give it a whole lot of attention. But the most recent, what was it called? The Antioch, was it Antioch? It was James White and those that had just started this. It was a declaration. I forgot the name of it. I thought, does it start with an A? Remember, it came out about a month ago,
People,
or
I don't even know how. Yeah, James White signed it. Doug Wilson signed
yeah.
it.
What
Joe
was it
Booth,
called?
Antioch Declaration.
Yeah, it was Antioch. Okay, good.
Yeah, you got it right. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I just
And that was like a concern over anti-Semitism, but it branched out into some other things. Like they
yes,
wanted to go after Aristotle in the
yeah.
document and implied that there's people out there saying that Aristotle is, I don't remember if it said equivalent to Jesus, or it was a very oddly
It was
phrased
very
portion.
odd. Yeah.
It was very odd. It was a weird document, in my opinion. There was a lot of things that I agreed with, but even the things I agreed with, I thought I agreed with, I didn't know what they meant by it because it was so vague. So it obviously was intended to make people aware that there's a problem, and then they're trying to divide from a group of people that are the problem. And I think that's what it accomplished. But as far as clarifying any issues, it didn't do that. And it created probably more confusion. So I didn't know about it until like 2 hours before it was about to be released publicly, so that, there was nothing I could do, and I wasn't asked to sign it or review it or any of that, which is fine. But uh, I think it just has further fractured things, and
Yeah.
there should be conversations between the guys who are more theonomic and kind of like old school reconstructionists,
Hmm.
and then the new Christian right guys, who many of which support a version of natural law, or at least interested in natural law. If we sat down and talked, I think we could probably find out we do have some things in common. Maybe there are
Hmm.
differences. There probably are, but we could probably figure out an arrangement to be co-belligerents. But there's just no interest.
Yeah.
It's like, it's heresy. It's a threat. It's false teaching. It's racist. It's so like you just throw your hands up and okay, all right, well,
Right.
I guess,
That's all we
and
can
then the
do.
problem is too, there's legitimately people I mentioned before who are ideologues who want to. Uh, there's not many of them, and most of them are anons online. But there are guys out there trying to promote kind of like a neo-Nazi ideology. But instead of going after them and putting a strong, like a steel man on them, and like, let's represent them accurately and refute them, what these guys have done is they've cast a very broad net, and they've tried to take down other figures that
Right.
they view as like somehow in league with that. And I think that's been a problem too, because we're used to the woke people calling people Nazis who aren't Nazis, and we're very sensitive to that at this point. We all should be. We all should be skeptical when you hear that, because
Hmm.
we've heard the boy cry wolf so many times, um,
Yes.
and it's like,
Yeah.
what's the threat? Tell me what the threat is again.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
some person said that they think that Jewish people might I shouldn't even say Jewish people, um, secular Jewish people who don't believe in Christianity are promoting their values in Hollywood, and it's like, oh my goodness, the sky's falling. And you're like, well, what, like, how does that make you a Nazi exactly? Like, I don't understand. uh I mean, that
Yeah.
does seem to be the case. Like, there are, whether Jewish or not Jewish, like there does seem to be a problem in Hollywood. I mean, I don't know. Like, I go to look for a movie and it seems like it's all trash and it makes fun
Yeah.
of my Lord. Like, what are you talking about? Of course, but
Exactly. Yeah.
they'll cry anti. Christ, the Christ is King controversy was this. So
Oh,
saying Christ
yeah.
is King is anti-Semitic. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's just that's true. That's
Yeah.
all it is.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. With that Antioch Declaration, like you said, I'm like, okay, I'm catching up on the tail end of this. So I tried to trace it back to its roots, and I thought something diversified in the middle of this. It went out, into different directions, and I don't know. But and I think lastly too, and I will begin to draw this to a close here. Looking at just within the theological challenges themselves. Of course, I'm from a point of view that I am concerned about the proliferation myself of those things such as the young Earth versus old Earth,
yeah.
local flood versus worldwide flood, those kind of things. And I'm a 6 day literalist. I'm a young Earth. And I go back and I restudy, and I'm just like I can't see any. I just don't agree with Hugh Ross and the others and all these things. Um, I really appreciated, though. It seems to be the whipping boy is the fundy, or however they want to term it, or the dispensationalist, the
Hmm. Yeah.
pre-tribulationalist.
Yep.
And I really, in fact, I want to listen to it again. I listened to it twice. I want to listen to it again. The one that you did so respectfully on podcast, I think it was maybe back in September, October, about dispensationalist, and that's not the target, guys.
Hmm.
Do you remember that
Did I
one?
do it? I'm planning
Yeah.
to do one on dispensationalism. I'm planning to. I've asked someone to come on the show and talk about it, but he's not hasn't gotten back to me. I did one. Maybe you're thinking of the one I did where it was like a Christian nationalist who was also a dispensationalist, and
Yeah, right, right. That's
I
the one. That's the
yeah,
one. But
yeah.
but there were things that you said in it that I just thought were great. So I encourage, everyone to listen to that one as well. So,
Yeah, yeah, I
there's a
think you're
number of
right. Some of these,
theological issues out there.
some like the threat of like old Earth is an old threat. So you were asking me about new
Yeah.
threats. Like that's always present. In fact, Wes Huff, who's the most popular apologist in the
Yes.
world right now, he seemed to signal that he might. It sounds like he's an old Earth creationist, and also maybe even open to some Darwin and evolutionary stuff. Someone
Right.
corrected me about that today, but the correction was basically that he's an intelligent design advocate, and I'm like, well, I didn't say that. I'm sure he is, obviously, but most of the intelligent design advocates, like from this Discovery Institute and stuff, like I love the work they're doing, but they do promote or they
Right.
do at least leave the door open. How, is that a better way
Right.
to put it? They leave the door open for Darwinian evolution. They just say that it's not like a random chance thing. It's not natural selection isn't the only mechanism. Obviously, God has to be involved,
Yeah.
which you and I would see that as a compromise. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
but that threat's ever present.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it just puts on new clothes and has maybe some bigger proponents, and those things are very concerning to me, and we'll continue to hold the ground on that. And I know we've got other issues. We got things like the next thing I think is what we're already trying to figure out is the AI, what it will do. I'm already seeing the ads for you can make your sermon with this, and even at LBU, our position so far, we're studying it more because it's something that universities and seminaries are having to get a grapple of, but. That is the use of AI, and we allow it as a source, a resource, an organizer, just not to write your papers for you, not to do the critical thinking for you. Because I always remind them, you'll always see the fine print at the bottom of the page when you've gotten your answer from AI. It'll say it can be mistaken. So,
Yeah. Oh, I've had it
yeah,
do that to me, and
yeah,
I think there is a place for like there is a place you could use it, but yeah, it's like a lot of technology. The cell phone is one of those things, right? Like if I could
yeah,
flip a button and we go back before cell phones, would I flip it? Probably. I think
yeah.
the harmful effects have been worse, but yeah, obviously, do I have a cell phone? I mean, it's right here, right?
Right,
So,
right, yeah, yeah. It's a
yeah, I
tool
mean,
that can be used either way.
cool.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I think too the concern there from some is how you've seen some mostly right now, individual churches, Europe and in the States, are using it in their services as part of the services and those kind of things. And so we got some other things coming up over the horizon, like we need one more, right? One more issue. But anyway, well, John, we'll bring this to a close. I cannot thank you enough for your time and muddling through the technological problems I had here earlier, and just your help, your support, your friendship, and I appreciate that very much. And want to continue to do the battle with you out there in the podcast world as much as I can, and just appreciate all that you're doing and have done. And I think you probably rarely get the pat on the back or the that a boy,
Oh, I don't
that a
need
boy.
it. And I
Yeah,
do
out of
sometimes, Megan mentioned me in her book, and I mean, yeah,
yeah.
the Lord, I leave that to the Lord, but
Yeah,
um,
I know,
thank
and
you.
yeah, and you're humble about it, and that makes it even more valuable. So, thank you again, my friend, and just let's close with a word of prayer real quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we could do that. I just
All
have to
right.
take off my hat. Hold on.
Yeah,
Now you get to
Father,
smell my hat here.
Father, thank you again so much for the time that John and I could have. Lord, I pray for your continued strengthening and guidance and empowerment of your spirit through the ministry and the doors of ministry that you've put in and doing through John. And pray for your protection and a blessing upon his family, Lord. And Lord, we are grateful for where you have him, the place you have him in this world to do this at this time. And just pray that you would bless Truth Unbound as well as we try to represent you in the best way we can as well. And Lord, we want to be firm and protect and defend, and as your word says in Jude, to earnestly contend for the faith. And there is everything to contend for, and you give that to us clearly. And so we want to continue to do that and ask that you would fill us and help us in our discouragement at times in fighting the battle, and also to see others come to you with being saved and coming to Christ, your Son, and believing in Him and for eternal life. And we thank you for all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Walter.
All right. Thank you, John.